You know that feeling when you read history and you just wish,
Yeah.
gosh, you could just be there, like a fly on the wall.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine being, I don't know, a student back then, actually in an ancient lecture, getting it straight from the source.
Well, that feeling just got a whole lot closer, didn't it? There's been this pretty groundbreaking discovery.
Hasn't there test? That's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
Thanks to the archaeological work, the recent work, of Professor Monika Trümper and Dr. Thomas Lappi from the Free University of Berlin.
Mm-hmm. They've unearthed something quite extraordinary over in Agrigento, Sicily. A real physical link to how they learned back then.
Exactly. So this deep dive, it's taking us right there, southern coast of Sicily, Agrigento. And this only just happened, right? March 2025.
That's right. Very recent.
They found this ancient lecture hall. Now, Agrigento, for anyone maybe less familiar, this place was a big deal in the ancient Mediterranean.
Oh, undoubtedly. A major Greek city. Very prosperous.
Yeah, founded way back, maybe 580 BC, by settlers from Gela Rhodes. And it grew fast. Became the biggest Greek colony on the whole island.
And size wasn't all. It was a real cultural hotspot, too, wasn't it? A place for ideas. So, education there, well, you'd expect it to be important.
Right. And I mean, Agrigento is already known for its gymnasium complex, which was, frankly, enormous.
It really was exceptional.
We're talking 200-meter running tracks, a huge swimming pool. Nothing else like it known in the Western Med, apparently. Really shows their commitment to physical well-being.
It certainly does. Physical training was clearly key. But this new find, it adds this whole intellectual layer, right? And that's kind of our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To figure out what this lecture hall means, how it fits into the bigger picture of Greek education, Greek culture, specifically there in Agrigento.
Okay, let's get into the details. So the big find, an ancient lecture hall inside the gymnasium complex. Can you paint a picture? What did it look like?
Yeah, okay. So based on what they've uncovered, the design is, well, it's pretty remarkable. Imagine semicircular rows of seats, stepping upwards, tiered seating. Enough room for about 200 people, they estimate, spread across 8 rows. And this shape, this curve, it naturally draws your eye to the front, as a central area for speaking.
Wow, 200 seats. That gives you a real sense of scale, doesn't it? For the classes or talks happening there.
Yeah.
But the age, that's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Exactly. That's the kicker. The dating puts it in the 2nd century BC.
2nd century BC.
Yeah. And why that matters is, well, it basically pushes back our whole timeline for these kinds of dedicated learning spaces by centuries, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it makes this the earliest known example. Nothing comparable shows up for another 200 or 300 years. It's a real aha moment,
Wow.
It suggests Agrigento was, well, way ahead of the curve in creating specific places just for intellectual learning.
That is genuinely remarkable. I mean, that basic design, rows facing a speaker, it feels so familiar, even today. And to think they had it sorted that early.
Wow, it's quite something.
And the finds didn't stop with just the structure, did they? There was more.
No, absolutely not. Down in that central area, the semicircular bit they call the orchestra, archaeologists found 2 big stone blocks, and they had writing on them.
An inscription. Okay, now we're talking. Like finding a note from the past. What did it say?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It gives us some real specifics. It mentions the gymnasiarch. He was basically the boss of the gymnasium.
Yep.
And it records that the roof of the apoditorium, that's the changing room, was renovated.
Ah, practical stuff.
Right. But crucially, it says who paid for it. A generous citizen using their own money.
Oh, interesting. Philanthropy back then.
Exactly. And this person dedicated the renovation work to the gods of the gymnasium, Hermes and Heracles.
So a private citizen stepping up, investing in this public or semi-public institution, that says a lot about how much they valued it, doesn't
It really does.
And choosing Hermes and Heracles, those specific gods.
Good choices, right. Hermes, associated with communication, knowledge, even boundaries, fits well with learning and physical activity. And Heracles, well, obviously strength, athletic skill, perfect for the physical side of the gymnasium.
Makes sense. And the inscription itself, when was that carved?
Okay, so the inscription itself, based on the letter shapes, how they wrote specific letters back then.
Epigraphy.
Exactly, epigraphy.
Yeah.
That points to the late 1st century BC.
Late 1st century BC. So hold on. By that point, Agrigento was actually under Roman rule.
That's right.
So did that change things? Did the Romans come in and alter how the gymnasium worked its role in education?
Well, this is what's so fascinating. You see this real cultural continuity. Even though Rome was in charge politically, the Greek language was still being used. Greek positions like the gymnasiarch still existed. Greek traditions carried on. And the Greek gymnasium, it clearly remained this central place for educating young people. It really shows how strong that Greek cultural influence was, even under new management, so to speak.
So the political structure changed, but that core Greek idea of education, it stuck around. That's really key. Okay, so this lecture hall, it wasn't just on its own, right? It connected to something else.
Correct. Yeah. It opened onto a bigger room adjacent to it, quite large, actually about 11 by 23 meters,
Okay, a fair size. And what was in there?
also equipped with benches.
Benches, too. So what was that space for? More lectures? Or something different?
The thinking is that this larger hall was probably a bit more multi-purpose. Still focused on intellectual stuff, though.
Right.
So yeah, maybe more classes, perhaps smaller groups, seminar-style things, but also maybe performances, debates, poetry readings, even competitions focus on the mind.
Okay, so it paints a picture of a real hub, doesn't it? Different kinds of learning and intellectual activity happening side by side.
Exactly. A really vibrant center of engagement.
So you've got this architectural pairing, the dedicated tiered lecture hall, and then this bigger, maybe more flexible space next door, both clearly for the mind, and both sitting right there inside this massive gymnasium complex dedicated to the body.
Precisely. It feels very intentional.
Yeah,
And if you step back and think about those core ancient Greek ideals, this whole setup, this architectural ensemble, it just perfectly mirrors the equal weight they put on cultivating, a healthy mind and a healthy
that
body.
makes that's ideal.
Right. It wasn't one or the other. They saw it as a whole package, totally essential for creating well-rounded citizens. So this discovery, it's not just stones and seats. It's like physical evidence of that whole educational philosophy.
That they were actually building it into their city.
Building it in, yes. A philosophy we talk about a lot today, but they were embedding it in their infrastructure over 2,000 years ago.
That is such a powerful point. It wasn't just talk. It was bricks and mortar, benches, and running tracks. This balance. Was it something unique to Agrigento, or do we see hints of this mind-body connection elsewhere in Greek education?
Oh, it's definitely a broader Greek theme. You see it reflected all over. In philosophy, obviously, but also things like the festivals. They often had athletic and artistic competitions, right?
Yeah.
And the whole concept of paideia, their word for education, it meant shaping the whole person, mind, and body. But Agrigento, having these distinct spaces, the athletic facilities and the intellectual ones, right together in one complex and so early, that gives us this incredibly clear physical example of that value in action.
It really does. Which brings us to a pretty important question, I think, for everyone listening.
Yeah.
What does this discovery actually mean for how we think about the history of education itself?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of forces us to rethink things a bit, doesn't it? The timeline, maybe even the sophistication of how education was organized back then. Finding this purpose-built lecture hall in the 2nd century BC, it suggests that, formal intellectual teaching was maybe more structured, more institutionalized, and definitely earlier than we generally assumed.
It really makes you stop and think. We talk so much today about balancing intellectual growth and, physical well-being,
Yeah.
mental health, physical health.
We do.
But this find just slams home that this isn't some new modern idea. It was fundamental to how they operated in Agrigento, literally thousands of years ago.
Precisely. It just reinforces how long people have valued developing both sides, not choosing one over the other, but seeing them as, well, totally interconnected, both essential for creating capable, engaged people.
So let's try and wrap this up, this deep dive, looking at this amazing lecture hall discovery in Agrigento. It gives us this incredible window, doesn't it, into how sophisticated education was in the ancient Greek world?
A valuable insight.
Yeah, and it really highlights how important the gymnasium was, not just for exercise, but as this genuine dual hub mind and body together, and importantly, much earlier than we realized.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for our listeners to chew on.
Go on.
Well, given this really early, very deliberate focus on nurturing both the mind and the body in education, how well do we actually do that today? In our own schools, our universities, our approach to personal development?
Good question.
What can we maybe still learn from that ancient model in Agrigento as we think about how we educate people now?